So we are in this one of the ugly buildings in Ginza.
Okay.
And when we step inside, it's interesting to see this beautiful Art Deco design inside of this building. And entire this building used to actually look like this.
Really?
And they stripped off all the external decorations in the 50s. And we saw the Lion beer hall as well. Used to have a beautiful facade, and they just stripped it off. And they did lots of actually injustice during the 50s and the 60s.
Yeah.
And one of the reason is, as you said, it was fashion. But also they prefer, let's say, older, those plain looking buildings. One of the reasons is after the war, what the people promoted was everybody was middle class.
Oh, interesting.
To show some kind of a social status or like a difference. Back then they thought that was really not really cool. But it's really shame. This entire building was one of the actual buildings only survive Art Deco buildings, in the Ginza.
Like we had started today at the Imperial Palace at Edo Castle talking about the concentric circles that radiated out. That was kind of like Japan's class system, that you had the emperor, and then you had the other daimyo, and then you had samurai and merchants, and then commoners. So that caste system survived through the war. And it was only after the war, when it was America making Japan be democratic, that it kind of fell? Or would you say?
Well, I think that is a historical, let's say that.
Okay.
Like a thing. But this is like cities are always evolving.
Yeah.
And I think that what the late 50 people in the late 50s thought was they want to make it more democratic. Buildings
Accessible to
look
all.
right,
Yeah.
accessibility and efficiency. And so they experienced, let's say, one of the so-called modernist movements in that area. And to me, that doesn't necessarily mean they're beautiful buildings, but they usually look plain and ugly. By the way, the design by in 30s by Czechoslovakian American Czech architect named Antonin Raymond.
Okay.
He was very actually knowledgeable about Japanese architecture, but also he introduced different Western style design and engineer-wise, aesthetics-wise. He designed this building, but also that he was a good teacher to young Japanese architects. So not only Frank Lloyd Wright, but also he was considered as one of the fathers of the modern Japanese architecture. So it's very interesting.
Yeah.
But he was also a consul of Czechoslovakia. And of course the embassy shut down because of the Nazi, and Japan became collaborators. Shut down in, I think, 1938. So he had to go back to US.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that because American government knew Antonin Raymond was knowledgeable Japanese architecture, he actually contributed lots of information about how Japanese cities mapped out.
Wow.
And what kind of material Japanese regular houses use, so that U.S. could invent effective firebombs,
Wow.
and they burn down, and they work effectively.
Wow.
And the funny thing is, after the war, he came back to Japan, and he built several new buildings.
He was on the right side as he needed to be. Wow.
Right.
But that's kind of this idea that the history is so hidden behind the walls, and so as you dig deeper,
especially in Tokyo,
you can understand a little bit more about, why this building, why here, why now. Yeah.
By the way, that this building is always Christian literature,
bookstore?
Christian bookstore.